We were talking to an NFL club, and the question essentially was, for this receiver, what's their route tree breakdown against these four coverages? On the side, asked that question to Sumer Brain, and 25 seconds later had the answer.
All right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today we're joined by Jack Jones. Jack is the co-founder of SūmerSports. Thanks so much for hopping on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Brent. Excited.
Jack's also a former fraternity brother of mine from Stanford, so this was not the coldest outreach I've ever done. But Jack, tell me, what is SūmerSports? How did this come to be?
SūmerSports, we're a sports data AI company, primarily focused right now on building, AI solutions for the NFL, as well as colleges. And actually, the company came to be based on a capstone project I was doing way back in 2020 for my master's. I co-managed a fantasy football team with my father, and we were perennial losers. So I was trying to figure out from a project standpoint, what can I do that has practical value? So I was like, I'm going to build a draft optimizer and for fantasy football, because I'm sure you play, Brandon. When do I pick? When the top two tight ends are off the board, what's the positional drop off? When do I wait now 5-6 rounds? Right? It is a math problem in a sense. So naturally, I thought, well, let's look to the NFL and see what type of technology or solutions they do through their draft, and quickly found that a lot of it was still very subjective and based on discretionary choices and decisions, and probably not as precise from a measurement standpoint as I expected. So that's kind of where the idea sparked in me. Hey, rather than doing a capstone project for fantasy football, why don't you take a leave of absence and try and go do this for the NFL? And haven't really looked back since. 4 years in now, we've radically pivoted from just trying to create an NFL draft optimizer to building a full-on, AI platform, to service NFL clubs, colleges, and football enthusiasts in general on the consumer side. So that's kind of how the idea originated. We named our company Sumer after the Sumerians, ancient Babylonian civilization. I think 4000 BC. They were widely known as the first civilization to come up with a system of metrology and measurement, which really resonated with me, because trying to be able to measure the impact of decisions, because once you can measure it, you can figure out how to optimize it. There's a quote Peter Drucker says, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if you don't have a way of measuring the decisions you're making, how then do you understand whether you're making optimal decisions or not? So that's kind of where the name Sumer came from. That's kind of the inception story. Fast forward to today, we've branched out rather than focusing on that niche draft dashboard project. Trying to build a full stack AI solution, for clubs and fans alike.
And if you look at the team of Sumer, it brings together some people with extreme technical backgrounds, working in the Silicon Valley technology world, some serious NFL and kind of sports experts who have been very much in the weeds. People like Mike Mayock are on your website there, and also people with hardcore finance backgrounds, to put it mildly. Talk about how the team came to be.
Yeah, so our hypothesis was generative AI is good, but once an expert in a specific field dives in, it falls apart. And that's not, a slight against generative AI. It's just, how do you create a more verticalized solution where the threshold level or tolerance level is much higher, where a lot of these generative models weren't built to be able to get to that level of depth. And that's kind of how we constructed our team, where we brought in the best of the best on the technology side, and married them with the best of the best on the football side. So, now over 600 years of NFL experience. This is, insights and expertise you just can't get, publicly. And I think that structure from an organizational standpoint has allowed us to build a more verticalized solution that then can service an audience that their expectations are a lot higher, given the stakes in which they're going to work every day.
How much has it helped to have those NFL scouts, NFL experts, people who have been in the really not the sports industry, but actually in the league in the case of the NFL, being, I assume, acting as kind of a liaison between your very smart, technical, hard finance people and the old school, football heads in the league? I'm curious how they've maybe served as like a jungle guide when it comes to actually getting in front of these teams and organizations that historically have not been exactly adopters living on the edge when it comes to this type of technology.
Yeah, so the hybrid approach has actually been really successful. I think just, sales and networking aside, I think just from an internal data development and product development standpoint, being able to access people who have been in those buildings, who many of their colleagues are actually still in the league, trying to understand those very niche workflows, and kind of the day-to-day is hugely invaluable. It's almost like user research at the snap of your fingers. And I think also from their perspective, they just have insight that the public doesn't have. So then being able to bake those assumptions, that decision logic, how we pre-process and engineer our data, and then deploy our SūmerBrain, our AI engine on top, really allows us to have a differentiated solution than what's out there today. So from that perspective, they're hugely invaluable. And then, of course, from the sales and networking side, because they know all of their colleagues are either still in the league or have friends that are in the league. I think from a comfortability standpoint, having that touch point is huge as well.
So to the best you can you give me a little bit of a history on data in the NFL? I mean, it was not long ago that this was an all gut feeling league. And obviously you can't do anything with the data if you've never collected it. You can't do anything with dirty, unclean, disorganized data. How has that evolution looked? Take us back maybe a couple decades if you can, and bring us up to speed to today.
Yeah, so I think kind of the first, and I'll give you my my perspective. I'm sure I'm probably missing some stuff here, but one of the first big milestones was 2006 when PFF, they kind of paved the way in that they started to do play level charting, starting all the way back in 2006. So beyond just the basic play-by-play, hey, this was a pass right to X receiver, 4 yards, incomplete, complete, right? They got a little deeper and started to chart various things like coverages, run schemes. Was it a play action? Was it a screen? All of this stuff. So that kind of was that first milestone of just getting a deeper play-by-play data set. Fast forward to, I think it was 2018 or 19, the NFL partnered with Zebra Technologies and actually got the NGS tracking RFID chips into the shoulder pads, and that collected data at every 10th of a second, so 10 frames. I think they could go to 60 frames per second, but they thought 10 is sufficient. Tracks XY location, orientation, all of that good stuff. And what that really enabled was a even more granular set of data that's looking at certain tracking data at every 10th of a second. And then, Mike Lopez of the NFL had the foresight and the brilliant idea to create actually a big data bowl competition around that and to open up some of that data to college kids and allow them to start interfacing and interacting with that data and building more advanced evaluation metrics and scheme identification models on top of that. So that's kind of that second big milestone, which is kind of that frame level tracking data. And then I think we're now in the midst of, hopefully this third milestone where we like to pride ourselves at Sumer on what we're starting to create is beyond just the frame level tracking data, actually creating frame level probability distributions of play level attributes. So take tackle, for instance, right? Rather than just charting, hey, there's a tackle on this play, binary 0-1, looking at all the players throughout the play and understanding what their probabilities of making that tackle is by the end of the play. So you could get even to a little bit more granular charting level at the frame, not just play. So that's one of the things we're really excited on and we're working on. And, sure others are also tackling that. And it's exciting to see, the frontier getting pushed further and further into a more granular data set.
Talk a little bit about the application of this product when it comes to the portal in college football and identifying skill sets that might fit into a specific program when it comes to the free agency that now exists at the college football level.
So the portal's hectic. Now this year there's just one portal. Like last year there were two windows. I think in total, I might be wrong here, but I think it was almost about 10,000 kids entered the portal last year. So it's a free for all. It's a mass amount of kids entering this portal with a little amount of time trying to evaluate all those players, particularly for college staffs who are probably under resourced or just don't have the time to sift through all of those kids and understand who's going to be the best fit. And oh, by the way, at what price when it's really unclear what even the market price is right now with NIL. So have the utmost respect for these colleges having to maneuver and navigate that universe. I think where we feel like we can really help on that is actually our experience. So SūmerBrain, our agentic AI on top of the data. So allowing a user to actually come in and, at their fingertips, just ask a question. Hey, I'm looking for a corner this height or this specific, sack rate, whatever, can you show me the top 10 or can you show me what we think their market value is? And in empowering them or enabling them to be able to glean this insight without having to go to one of their data engineers or go to someone on the team and be like, hey, can you write me a report and grab these 20 guys based on this criteria, right? Or this certain, this data criteria. So because it's such a short window and they have to go through so many players and so quickly, leveraging, an AI solution that can rationalize and read that data much more quickly and glean that insight, I think saves them time to be a little, do their due diligence a little bit more quickly and thoroughly in this window that's tight and, in this massive universe of players.
Have there been, I would assume the answer is yes, but have there been a couple of crazy kind of aha moments where you guys get to be in front of maybe a head of player personnel or a GM or a head coach of a program and you get to demo your product? And this really feels like a revolutionary opportunity. The combination of the robustness and the size of the data set combined with the ability to interface with it, query the data via natural language, via English in a chat interface like you just talked about with SūmerBrain. Talk a little bit about if there have been any standout moments when you're showing this off for the first time.
Yeah, I think one of the most rewarding moments, we were talking to an NFL club, and live in the conversation, they actually said, man, I really wish that, I could answer this question. And the question essentially was basically for this receiver, what's their route tree breakdown against these four coverages? And we actually, on the side asked that question to SūmerBrain and, 25 seconds later had the answer. And I think they were quite spellbound there because, typically that's hey, go run this report, write this SQL, pull it, print it out, hand it back to me, right? And being able to get that in under 30 seconds was really rewarding for us. I think the caveat there with a lot of these, chatbots, and you'll see it, whether it's, our SūmerBrain or just some of the more larger, foundational models like, Claude or ChatGPT, right, is they are probabilistic by nature, which means they're not going to be 100% accurate and correct every time. And there's a trade-off there, right? Because you can be very deterministic and create these predefined views. The problem is those aren't robust, right? So you go create a view of, hey, I want to look at his completion percentage when blitzed. But then someone asks, well, I want to know when blitzed on third down or in the red zone or, 40 yards, to go to the end zone, right? So there's a trade-off there, and I think there's a paradigm shift coming among users to get a little bit more comfortable in that probabilistic nature, where at times it's not going to be perfectly accurate, but if you can look at the underlying SQL it's writing and understand it, you can start to appreciate that it's 85 to 90% there, and it's missing this one thing. Now let's get one of our data engineers to just quickly change that one SQL line, and boom, there it is. So it's actually enhancing the speed at which they write that SQL. I think it's a weird paradigm shift because, as you know, they expect 100% accuracy, right? And that's where the deterministic world comes into play, and it's so powerful, but it's not robust. So I think that's going to be a really interesting paradigm shift is how do you know, can you accept a 90% accuracy with this robustness? You know, because yes, 9 out of 10 times you're getting the right answer and you're saving several, if not tens of hours a week, that normally you'd be having to extensively go write that, write that SQL to get that, insight. And is that a sufficient trade-off? To me, yes. Like if I'm getting 9 out of 10 times, I'm saving 12 hours of my week to go do other stuff like that. That's a win. But that's kind of this in between in this age we're in right now, where a lot of people will just accept the answer. Like if you go to a Perplexity, I was asking Perplexity a couple of weeks ago when the Giants were playing the Eagles, like when's the last time the Giants beat the Eagles? And it was just wrong, like just straight up wrong. The date was incorrect. And it's wild because, you tend to believe it, but at times you have to take a pause and really just sit down and try to validate that. So that's one of the challenges we're grappling with right now. We have an audience that has a super high expectation or threshold level, and trying to hit that is a challenge, and trying to educate them that at times it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be fast and it's going to get you 95% of the way there in, 5% of the time.
You talked a little bit about that example with a specific receiver and understanding their route trade, maybe where they're strong and where they might be weak. That makes me think about the player development possibilities that come from this data set. And I've talked to Marcus Elliott, was an episode from this past spring. He's arguably the leading sports science, data-driven player development guy in the country at P3 in Santa Barbara, and they have a facility in Atlanta as well. Tons of NBA analysis, primarily they've done multiple sports. And, he's talked so much about how the data revolution in sports was such a grind and so difficult to get people to wrap their heads around for the first 15, 20 years that he was kind of pioneering and trailblazing in this space. And then interestingly, you mentioned a change in 2018, 2019 with that Zebra Technologies when it came to the NFL. He also looks at 2017, 2018 as a time when people started to come around and said, you know what, I think I do want this data. I think I actually have a place to put this data now. And I'd love to start actually making sense of it and see if I can put it to work for myself. Tell me more about how you guys see the roadmap for Sumer when it comes to individual player development.
So I think that's one of the most exciting fields, and we are very much interested in that field and working towards a solution around that. I think today, right or wrong, NFL players specifically, they have very limited access to data, and even film at times. I think that's kind of controlled by the league and by the teams. And one of the things we're working on, or what we'd love to do, is be able to democratize some of that data for the players and build an experience that allows them, again, to glean that insight very easily, whether it be through, Sumer Brain chat interface or just married on film. One of the things that we're really interested in and that we're working on is building a film-centric player development experience where, players don't love looking at numbers and numerical data. What they really understand is when they look at film, and they can understand all of the data behind the film by just watching the play. So one of the things we want to figure out is how do we marry the data with the film so that they're actually looking at the film and understanding it, but in the background, all the data that was queried is what's bringing up that select film to understand a certain context or situation, how they can improve in that situation, what they did well in that situation, where there was a miscommunication. So that's one of the things we're really passionate about, is how do we democratize data for players? And kind of the best way we see that is marrying it with film, because that's kind of the medium in which they learn. And I think that is one of the big next frontiers, is leveling up players, when it comes to data, because right now they're quite closed off from that. And they're kind of just at the mercy or the will of what the coaches are communicating in the locker room. But to me, I've always thought, look, if, you're working your entire childhood, college, all the way up to this point to get to that second contract, I would love to have any and all data on me, whether it's human performance data, evaluation data, play level, whatever it is. I would love to be able to have access to that to figure out how I can develop and improve into a better player. I think the tricky part is how do you build an experience that allows them to quickly understand that data? Because a lot of it is really dense and granular, and we even struggle to tell the story of that data.
You talked a little bit about the consumer, the super fan can kind of play around with this. What if it's for your fantasy football league, for example? Is there a push in the future for Sumer to have more kind of public exposure? I immediately think of like next gen stats or, Pro Football Focus and NBC and things that they've done together where you can really imagine some sort of a partnership with these streamers and distributors and broadcasters where you're like, okay, let's go into the data presented by Sumer or whatever it is, where all of a sudden for the players who are coming up, who are in middle school, high school, watching Monday Night Football, they start to get this familiarity of, oh, these professional guys have this data engine behind them that is telling them how to improve. And like, I shouldn't just be going all off of feel or what my coach says or my trainer says. Like, you should listen to them probably, but to have that data foundation behind the arguments and the coaching that you're receiving, when that becomes basically table stakes for a young player, you can imagine what that would do to elevate the adoption of a product like this for the player, for the coach, for the whole kind of ecosystem later in the process in college and in the pros.
NGS, they pair with all the broadcasters, but particularly even Amazon on Thursday Night Football. They're doing a great job with their Prime Vision feed, just starting to level up both the consumer and or a youth player, a high school player who's watching football and starting to understand from a data lens. Like, they're doing great work there in slowly leveling up from a data education standpoint. They'll start to show like stuff like target share. They'll look at certain like motion, like, blitz recognition or pressure probabilities, pocket health. Like, so they're doing some great work there. That's something we definitely want to tap into on the consumer side. I think this fall, what we basically did is, we had built our entire proprietary data set and we said, we're going to take our Sumer brain and we're going to hook it up to it and, build our football specific point of view and context and just release it to the consumers. It is our open beta is out now. We've gotten a ton of feedback and, 100,000 plus prompts coming, prompts since inception in early October. So we've gotten a lot of data that we can go and process and figure out, how we improve it moving forward. But we kind of just wanted to open it up to the wild and just start to see what people are asking. And of course, based on the specific level of audience expertise, you get some wild questions and then some very basic questions. But I think what we're trying to figure out now is how do you educate and scale with regards to this data. And that's the part we're working on right now. Is there's so much data that we've created all the way down to the frame level, and it's given a certain audience, as rich as it is, if you don't know how to distill it down and spoon feed it to the user, it's utterly useless, right? Because it's so dense. So that's what we're trying to work on now. And I think that's where you can tap into the younger generation from a player development standpoint, because if you can figure out how to take these play level attributes or the frame, the frame probability distributions of these play level attributes and marry it with film, so it resonates when a kid watches, oh wow, like the model, was saying, hey, my tackle right there should have been 82%. And it's flagging this play because I didn't make the tackle. And he's watching the film and seeing, oh yeah, I had the right angle, I had the right vision, everything was there, I just missed the tackle, right? Versus trying to flag an extraordinary play where the model, which is trained off, hundreds of thousands, millions of plays, averaged across, player movements since 2018, it's saying, hey, you have a 22% chance of making this tackle, but you made the tackle on the play. So you you basically broke the model. Like, you're above expectation tackle probability there. Let's flag that play, show it to the player, and they quickly see, hopefully if our data is correct, which we like to think it is, they'll start to see and be like, oh wow, like this was a fantastic play by me. I anticipated, I was, 14 yards away from the ball carrier, but I positioned myself and took the angle to make the tackle 25 yards downfield. So like trying to be able to expedite that film review and that film study and surface good plays, bad plays in specific contexts, being able to do that automatically is something that's really interesting to us. But again, it takes time and it takes curation, and all those scouts and ex-coaches and general managers on our team, they're the ones who are constantly iterating and refining that data and that model, because we want to scale off their intelligence, and we want to be able to almost bias the model toward how they see the game of football to ensure that it's showing the right stuff.
Making a play that breaks the model seems like a nice way to earn a sticker on your helmet, you know?
Yeah.
That'll do it. So what is something that when you watch an NFL or a college broadcast, that knowing, I mean, all of these things that you track in your data set, what are a few things that you wish were mentioned more, or maybe focused on more, so that they get into the weeds and only the sports nerds can understand what they're talking about, but what's something that, given the access you have to that data set, you say, geez, this is such a key indicator of success or failure or whatever. Like, I really wish the broadcasters would educate the audience on this specific metric.
Yeah. For me, it's quarterback decision making. So typically, like at times, a broadcast will cover it and show, hey, a guy was open earlier. He should have thrown to player X, not player Y. But it's quite seldom. Like for me, being able to not just look at the result of the play, or, when the quarterback was at the time of throw, were they throwing to the receiver at the highest, completion probability or expected yards, etc., but looking at the entirety of the play and based on their reads and progressions, which quite honestly is very specific to that club. Like, no model is going to have that context. So at times you got to try and, infer it, but being able to quickly identify, given ostensibly the goal of this play and what we at least can understand, did this quarterback make the right decision? And I think that's where, from a broadcast perspective, that's really interesting for an advanced user all the way up to a casual user, because you can sit in replay and say, okay, look, like he threw to, Devontae Smith, right? But 1 second earlier, right, you had AJ Brown against this coverage, that was going to fall into this pocket, and he should have thrown here, right? And I think it's tricky from a broadcast perspective to find that live, because that takes a lot of, mental compute to be able to quickly find where those plays are. And that's where I think some of our data can really help to find those subset of plays, where truly the model thought at this frame, this player had the highest completion probability or expected yards, and the quarterback never threw to him. He actually threw to this player, and almost as like an easier filter to then bring to the broadcast and be like, okay, in replay, like look at these 6 plays and like have a talk track over this, because like these are the 6 plays where we feel like the quarterback just was not making the optimal decision. That is really, like, I'm really passionate about that. That's really interesting. I think everything starts and ends with the quarterback anyways. So that's one. I think one that's already kind of a commodity and everyone looks at is separation. So like receiver separation, like that's such a predictive measure.
Last question. Where's the next big push for Sumer, and where can people find you to mess around with Sumer Brain?
So next big push is currently we have our open beta out for Sumer Brain. And if you just go to our website, you can sign up there. Next big push is to deploy an actual live experience by the playoffs is the goal. So that the idea is you can log on and live during the game, we'll have all of our data updating after every play, as well as some predefined views, and as well as an actual Sumer Brain engine to be able to answer questions live. So that's the goal. We're pushing hard to make it in time for Wildcard Weekend. So stay tuned.
That's awesome. That's going to be some sick double screening for the sports nerds out there.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You got your YouTube TV video here, and you got the dashboard there. But yeah.
I love it. All right, Jack, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. I'll let you go, but let's talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent.